Poker face, poker face, poker face. Hello, I am Jiggy, and today I am bluffing with my Muffin. What's up, guys? Martin Fournier with you. 3 tables, 25.50, and this one is going to be fun. I am going to play blind. So I've organized some sort of paper notes over my whole cards on every table, so I don't have a clue what are my 2 cards at any point in the hand. So basically, what I'll be doing in that video is try to focus on everything but my actual cards, obviously. Try to spot boards and situations and positions where aggression is usually enough to show a good profit, and do some good exercises of board reading. What did I have? Oh shit! I did flop trips, didn't know. Yeah, exercise on board reading, when to c-bet, when to go for 1, 2, 3 barrels. I mean, it's obviously not going to be complete for as far as situations being good or not to multi-barrel or whatever, because your holding always plays a big part in your decision making. But if I can completely shut down one of the elements, which is my own holdings, and obviously an element that is definitely overplayed by a lot of people, I think we can get a lot better with all the other elements, if that makes sense. So yeah, looks good on that table. I think looks like I have a pretty passive guy on my right, so I should be able to steal a lot, which is going to be my only way of winning pots, obviously. I might look like I'm doing absolutely anything, of course. You're seeing my old cards and I don't. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how it will turn out. It probably will only be a 1-part video, because it should be kind of weird, but I mean, if it's not educational, it should be at least entertaining, I guess. So I did flat on table 1, 4-way, even though I don't know what I have, especially for those. I made it basically for those occasions where I'm gonna flat here with I don't know what. I think we're deep enough so that I can make plays on certain boards. Yeah, those situations for where I think people are just not aggressive enough most of the time, especially at these stakes. I mean, I couldn't play blind at 5-10. I wouldn't stand a chance, obviously. But at 25-50 cents, I think I do have a chance of doing reasonably well under some circumstances. So here, monocolor board, pretty much in his range, 2 broadways. I'm just going to fold, obviously. Table 1, my play did work, and I did flat pre-flop with what ended up being 6-3, apparently. Just to illustrate the fact that people usually are way too passive in multi-way pots, unless they have something good. People just don't bluff a lot in these situations, and not only do they not bluff a lot, but they give a lot. Well, it kind of goes together that they do give a lot of credit for anyone who is going to bet into 3 or 4 people, of course. It's understandable since no one's ever bluffing, so you should be bluffing. I think this is a good trend to spot and exploit. So I'm going to try to do that again here. Here I'm going to see what I have before folding. And I did fold. And what happened here, it's another spot of me flatting with I don't know what. It's actually, I've been playing at these tables like for 20 something minutes, looking at my cards before starting, and then for like 5 minutes without looking at my cards, and it's actually a lot tougher than I expected. For some reason, I expected that to be easy. Here, I'm table 1, I'm just gonna look. Okay, I'm not gonna call with that. But yeah, it's a lot tougher than I expected, but I think it should work out pretty well. Table 2, once again, multi-way pot, exploiting the fact that people are usually way too weak in those, and the fact that I did receive some good tail here with the button betting only 2. I'm gonna raise under the gun just for the fun of it. I'm gonna do it from time to time just to discuss some early position situations. Yeah, the fact that he's betting only 2 on that board into 2 people, I mean, this is pretty much an obvious very obvious stealing situation. I think if they're going to bet for value, they're going to bet much bigger than that usually. And if the button does call a check raise here, I'm probably going to be barreling turn and river, since it was a 3-way flop. Table 2, I don't know what I have. I'm just gonna bet the river. Everything got there. I don't think he can call me with 1 pair hands. And yeah, on the replayer hand, basically, I'm just gonna barrel most of the time, because since he bets 2, I don't think he ever has trips or better in his range, and most people usually won't call down their whole stack without trips or better, basically. So that's my point of trying to attack weakness. I'll be looking at situations to where people, where because of some action on any street, basically someone is not only unlikely but pretty much never has the nuts. And since at those limits, I think you usually rarely get called by someone who doesn't have the nuts. I'll be looking to fire up big bluffs at weakness. So yeah, pretty much attacking any sign of weakness just because it's my only way of winning pots. Coming back on table 3, 2 hands ago, I did raise under the gun just for the fun of it, and figured out on this board, under the gun +1 is calling. I think this is a great board for multi-barreling, because there are not a lot of King X in his range, especially since there are already 2 kings out there. It cuts down on the combos. I don't think I'm getting called down 3 barrels. I was going to 3 barrel basically on this board from the beginning, because I don't think I get called down a lot. I think your usual opponent at these limits is going to be calling once or twice with a medium pocket pair quite a lot, but folding most of the time to a big 3rd barrel. So I think this is very good situation position wise and board wise to go for just 3 barrel, trying to represent King X and receiving a lot of folds from semi-made hands that will call once or twice basically. And I was barreling on clubs as well, because I think in those positions under the gun against under the gun +1, I think your usual opponent at those stakes will tend to show up a lot more with a medium pocket pair than any other holding, basically a lot less drawing hands. I'm just going to give up here. I might be folding aces from time to time, I don't know. Here 4 people, my-color board ace high, I'm probably going to give up. I might be giving up a flush, I don't know. After the flop getting checked all around, and then that's pretty important on the turn, you want to pay attention to all those little details. Here with the big blind betting, I can't do anything. But on the turn, that kind of situation, on a flop where, I mean, we pretty much rule out button after the flop since he did not bet, and someone with pair of aces or more will usually bet into 3 players to protect their hand in that situation, especially with his stack size. you want to pay attention to little details, like I said, like on the turn when the small blind, who is basically one of the two players here who could be having something, given that they could have planned on check raising or check calling the flop. He checked really quick on the turn, and it usually tells you that he's just given up on that board. So with the small blind checking so quickly and usually just giving up in that situation, and the button giving up most of the time as well, I think if big blind had not bet, I was probably going to fire the turn and hope to just take it down. Basically, I'm gonna flat my big blind with something, and I'll be looking at flatting some big blinds just to see what type of board is good to check raise or dunk lead or try to bluff at in certain situations. I think this is a great board for me to go ahead and check raise and fire my whole stack as a bluff. I don't really have a read on that guy, except that he's playing 21-13. Here I'm gonna check at my cards at table 1, just in case. But yeah, on table 3, I think this is a great opportunity, especially once he bets less than half the pot, to go ahead, check raise, and fire my whole stack as a bluff. I think if he has straight, set, 2 pairs plus, he's usually going to bet bigger, and straights and sets are not really in his range of raising from that position, given that he's playing 21-13, and all those hands are way much more in my own range, and so many cards anyways are going to allow me to continue my bluff. I did have a pretty good hand. That's nice. So I think this is a great board to, since poker is obviously a battle of ranges, at least against people who kind of understand that. I think this board suits my range a lot better than his range for as far as going broke, as far as having real top strength goes, basically. I'm not gonna call out of position. I'm just gonna fold, I guess. And this guy is playing so tight, but people who play really tight usually don't know how to respond to a lot of aggression, so I'm gonna keep putting a lot of aggression on every table, since I can't win by doing anything else. I'm playing a lot of hands, of course, but I do want to see a lot of boards, see a lot of different situations where you can be looking at being aggressive, because I do want with that video to correct some of, but basically most people's league, which is not being aggressive enough. This board is pretty similar to the 2-3-4 board, the 2-3-6, pretty much the same thinking. The one difference with this board is that Ace X doesn't have a gut shot, and I think it's even better for me to try and bluff at it, since I have no shot at getting called by Ace X, and he can't put me on basically Ace X that would have a gut shot. I raise under again here, Ace 3-4 rainbow. I mean, this is, I think, the most obvious one barrel board that you'll ever see. You usually won't get called by someone without an ace. Here, 2 of diamonds. This is pretty much one of the very worst cards in the deck for me to try and keep on bluffing. I would usually keep on bluffing on most cards, but not on this one. For obvious reasons, I think it cuts down on my value combos, and it gives a lot of strength to his value combos, basically. So I'm just going to check and give up. Table 2, I'm going to look at my cards now, because it would be useless to do anything else. I'm just going to fold. And table 3, I think I do have to look at my cards too, because I have to respond to his bet, and I don't have anything. I actually was... On table 3, I actually was planning on checking the flop in order to bet the turn as a bluff, because I think this is a very good board for basically anyone to try and represent. And on the river, like, I mean, when I get bet on the river, I'm just gonna check my cards as well. I don't have shit Once again, I'm not running really good at hitting something. I guess it's standard. But yeah, this ace-ace juice board, I think that's kind of a great board to delay c-bet on, because I think you do represent a lot more holdings. It would be dangerous to try and delay c-bet on that board against someone very aggressive, just because it would be a great situation for your opponent to go ahead and check raise you with a wide range of bluffs. Like, you check back that, and then you bet the turn, and then he check raises you. You obviously are going to represent kings, queens, jacks, tens quite a lot, and if you're against someone really aggressive who knows that, he's gonna take advantage of that range that you're representing basically and try to make you fold most of it. But I don't expect to see that play that often at those stakes. So I think trying to represent, like I said, kings, queens, and jacks will usually work pretty well by betting turn, or probably depending on what comes, maybe turn plus river, hoping that my opponent will fold any pairs from basically tens to fives that he could have called with pre-flop in order to set mine, especially given the stack sizes. I could bet the flop as well too, but the problem with betting the flop is that your opponent's calling range on the flop on that board is a lot less defined than it is when he check calls the turn, given that the turn would be a brick, let's say. He could have a flush draw on the flop, he could have a medium pocket pair, or he could have Yahoo! Dun, 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 dun. Or he could have ace-6, and in those situations where I'm gonna bet ace 4-7 board, I think this is obviously a great board to barrel on, and I'm gonna defend my big blind, see what happens, try to attack weakness. I think this is a board where I'm gonna receive a check back a lot so that I can bluff later. Coming back on that ace-ace deuce, in situations where you are not making a lot of hands fold only by betting the flop, which is, I think, the case here. The only hands that you're making your opponent fold on the flop most of the time are going to be, given that this opponent is kind of a standard-ish low stakes player, I think he's going to call like one street with pairs like 6, 7, 8. So I think for your flop bluff to be profitable, you have to turn it into a multi-barrel bluff. But the problem by multi-barreling from the flop is that you allow your opponent to slow play ace-x quite a lot. So you will be multi-barreling in the nuts pretty often, because I think a lot of opponents will check call a6 for 3 streets here. So every time basically that you are looking, like I said, at multi-barreling a situation, you want to not make sure, but you want to give yourself a chance for your opponent to give a chance to your opponent to tell it to you want to force him into telling you that he has the nuts before you put in 3 barrels basically. And by checking the flop here, I think this works very well for that. Once I check the flop, most opponents will usually either lead the turn with a6 or check raise the turn with a6. So I'm usually going to be losing only 1 barrel to a6, but by barreling turn plus river, I should be able to make him fold pretty much all of the holdings that would have folded to a flop plus turn plus river bet, or a flop plus turn bet basically. Hope that this is clear enough. I think it does make sense. And I just keep on firing at any weakness that I can see. Given that I have no clue what I have, I'm gonna check at my... I do have trips. That is incredible! Yay! And I mean, I don't have a clue who's this guy, and I'm gonna check here. I have queen deuce, this is no good. But I don't have a clue who's this guy, but I think No, I don't want to do that. But I do think calling would be a pretty big mistake. I want to build a pot. He's taking a fishy line. No matter what he's holding, it's definitely a fishy line here, limping and then raising the turn. I'm going to just repop and hope that he either turned a good draw, which is really possible that he's definitely going to call with, or that he was kind of slow playing aces or something like that, and that he won't be able to let it go. I don't want to call and then having to uh, check river and then have to react to him and then give him a chance to check back a lot of things. And I'm obviously going to call, and he has better trips than I do, which sucks. I did not see that coming. But no big deal, of course. Of course. Given that how fishy his line seemed. I mean, he's obviously going to go broke with way worse than that. I think. I hope so, actually. So, yeah. Yep. Table 2. Oh, he's cool, though. He's sorry. Go fuck yourself. Table 2. This is a monocolor board, of course. This is a kind of board where I actually really make my c-bet decision on my holding, depending on if I have showdown value and if I do have a diamond and that sort of thing. Without any of that knowledge, I think this is a kind of board where it's pretty tough to take a good decision. But when it's pretty tough to take a good decision, I like to rely on my on that situation I was talking about with the ace deuce board, where I hope my opponent will, before starting a multi-barrel bluff, I will give my opponent a chance to tell me what he has, basically. Seeing how he reacts to the turn. Now, here on the turn, I decided to attack his pretty weak bet just because I felt like it was absurdly weak and that I thought I could represent 6x pretty well here if he's at least a decent hand reader. He should see that coming. So with his weak bet, I thought raising the turn and then pounding a big bet on the river had a pretty good chance of taking down the pot. I'm gonna call out of position with any holding, and I'm gonna be looking at the board before seeing what I do. This is a great board. This is exactly the kind of board where when you flat a 3-bet out of position on which you want to attack the re-raiser, because not only does it not really fall into your opponent's re-raising range, but it does fall into your range, and your opponent has to be scared. Like, you're by dunk leading on that board, you're cutting all of your opponent's options because he has to be scared that I'm just gonna fold, I guess, here. Yeah, I'm just looking at what I was folding. And on table 3, I think this is definitely a good board to go for 2-barrel after calling a check raise against most opponents. But I'm kind of changing my opinion. I'm just gonna give up just because I've been playing way too aggressive. This is kind of situation where I don't know, given how little info I have on the guy, whether I should have to fire 2 or 3 barrels in order to make my my bluff profitable, in order to make him. I'm gonna look at my cards. Oh shit, I should have started bluffing a while ago. I'm just gonna overbet and hope he calls with kings or something, because I not represent anything. But this is definitely the kind of situation where you're kind of in the dark as to whether you have to fire 1, 2, or 3 barrels in order to make your opponent fold something like kings or queens here on that board. And pro, I understand his not understanding of my play. I mean, this is probably the first time I ever took that line in my life, and it worked. Four of a kind, and I do uh, withdraw my earlier comments about not hitting a lot of hands. But yeah, coming back on that board after calling a 3-bet, this is obviously, I think, once again, it's a situation where if you don't have any info on your opponent, you don't know how many barrels you have to fire in order to make your flop barrel profitable. And in those situations where you're kind of lost between how many barrels you have to fire and how often your opponent is going to check the flop with something like a6 in order to basically trap you because you're playing so aggressively. Um, I'm gonna call again. I'm just playing too aggressive not to call those. I think this is kind of situation, like I said, when you don't know that on which you have to give up uh, more often than just fire kind of in the dark and then choking on like not firing the right amount of streets basically. I think this king queen 6 10 board is quite different because I don't think he ever has king x here. Given how quickly he checked the flop, I think I'm going to see a lot more of a queen x stuff like ace queen in his range, and I think most players will fold to a third barrel on that board, and I'm obviously going to shoot for 3 barrels, and this is a great card for me. I haven't looked at my cards yet, but this is a perfect card for my range, given that he does not have either Jack X, or he pretty much never has a flush, obviously, but I just have to hope he doesn't have Jack X, and he did have King Queen, which I absolutely not expected, and I did have Deuce 3 offsuit. I hoped for an instant that I had something better than that, but I think I'm gonna stay on my statement that this is definitely a really good board uh, to barrel on, because most players will show up Queen X here on that draw. If you have a board, I expect most players to bet the flop here with such a strong hand, but it's probably because of the retarded image that I've built myself in the past hour or so of playing those tables that got me into trouble here. Table 3, I don't remember the action, the pre-flop action. I think he limp called this small blind, but I'm really not sure. And this is not a really good board to keep bluffing on, unless I have some equity, but I don't have a clue if I have equity. So I think this is definitely not a situation where I could be blamed for just checking down and hoping I have a pair. This falls right in his range after, I don't know if it's check calling or raising the small blind. I think both options are going to play pretty similarly. Once he check calls the flop, I think a lot of his holdings are going to be in the pair plus gut shot range, and the deuce either gave him something like a flush here or uh, pair plus open ender now that he's not going to fold either, or something like that. Given that I did have flush draw and open ender on the turn, I would have definitely bet that as a semi bluff, but in general, if you don't have that equity, I don't think it would be such a good spot to try and multi-barrel on. This is not the kind of board that you want to be looking at, the kind of turn basically that you want to look at into multi-barreling. I would have definitely started firing turn plus river on anything above a 7 that was not a club, I think, basically. Um, because in the very beginning, this is a great board to start barreling even if you don't have anything, because this is the kind of board what you want to be looking at when you're looking at boards that you want to barrel, uh, boards on which your opponent check calling range will have a hard time playing the later streets basically. whether because a lot of scare cards are going to come for his check calling range, or if his check calling range doesn't include any sort of nuts at all, basically. All those situations for, I don't know if there are other reasons, those are probably the two main reasons for which players' check calling range would be tough to play for the later streets, but this is obviously what you want to look at. Here I've raised, received 2 calls, good board to fire once, definitely into 2 players. I think I'm gonna, here I'm firing twice on that board would pretty much be useless. I think I'm gonna fire smallish on the turn and then jam the river. Table 1 I'm gonna check what I have just because I'm planning on folding anyways. But I think this is a great board. Now the river absolutely sucks to keep up with my plan, because I think there are quite a lot of 9-10 and Jack-10 and Queen-10 type of hands on the turn that are going to call my smallish bet that won't be able to call river over bet. Now the only hands that I would make my opponent fold are King Queen and Ace Queen, and those are probably not enough combos for a bluff to be profitable. But I was definitely planning on jamming. I'll check what I have. Oh, I'm so dumb. I should have checked before. I do have a straight, which I didn't know. And he probably, given that he checked behind, he did have King Jack, and that's exactly why I was basically planning before the river on betting small. I think this is a great play and a great example of a principle that you want to be looking at quite a lot. I'll review it. So I'm betting 3 standard continuation bet here. On the turn, there are a lot. There are 2 type of hands in his range basically on the turn. They are 2 pairs plus, which are possible, definitely possible. King 10 suited, Queen Jack, maybe even Jack 9 suited are definitely possible, or you could have trips. And there are the pair plus draw combo, either flush draw or straight draw. What you want to do most of the time when your opponent has this type of range is that you want to manipulate your betting so that you don't really give him a choice to do for him to do what you want him to do. So here, by betting really small on the turn, I think he's going to call pretty much always with all of his pair plus draw hands, because he wouldn't want to turn them into a bluff and raise them. Most people won't do that at these limits anyways. No matter the situation, I'm gonna call just for the fun. I'm gonna raise here. Here, King 7 8 two-tone, not so great of a board to make anything on. I think the king falls a lot more in his range than in my range, and most people know that. So I'm usually, I mean, you don't have to attack every single board when you flat 3 bets out of positions. You do want to look at the very good boards, and this one is definitely not the type of board that I absolutely have to attack in order to make my call profitable. I'm gonna come back on the ace-10, sorry. I'm gonna look at my hand. I do have checks, which is way better than I expected. And on the hand that I 3-bet, this is obviously a great board for me to start barreling, because this represents exactly the situation where his check calling range from the flop will have a hard time playing the later streets. I'm gonna check all once with my jacks. Hope he shut downs, or hope that something like the 9 of spades comes on the turn and I could be able to turn my hand to a bluff. So yeah, on table 3 I'm definitely going to fire my whole stack as a bluff, given what I was describing, and he definitely doesn't shut down, he's just shoving. I'm gonna fold. This could be a draw, but I mean, I would expect it to be much more often a made hand that doesn't want to get outdrawn, given how fishy he looks Uh, it just looks more like a made hand than a draw to me, given the type of players that he type of player that he looks to be. And coming back on the ace 10, like I said, two types of hands in his range, so I want to manipulate these two type of hands, and by betting small, I think it. I mean, he's by no means obligated to raise, and I would advocate calling against a lot of aggressive opponents just because you are definitely playing your hand very deceptively by doing that on such a small raise on the half pot bet, on such a small half pot bet basically. But I think most players here at these stakes will raise their monsters and call their one pair hands on that turn, so that if the deuce of hearts comes on the river, I would have probably just like fired either pot or a little overbet, and the only single hand that could have called me at this point would probably have been ace queen, because I expect him to raise any two pairs plus on the turn given my bet sizing. So I hope you get that concept right of trying to manipulate your opponent and their hand ranges given the boards. I'm going to check my hand on table 1 again. Not much I can do other than try to have a hand in that situation against a button raiser who is not deep enough for me to try anything fancy. I might have skipped one or two hands talking about the other ones. I'm sorry if I did skip some interesting ones. As usual, you can ask questions in the comments section for that video. Here I decided to 3-bet my opponent. I think this is a good board. I mean, to against pretty much anyone. I think this is a good board basically to. I don't know yet. I'm gonna stop talking. It's pretty tricky given his stack size of not 100 big blinds, obviously. But I think this is a good one to pull out my old move of betting so small that he's going to raise with pretty much. He's going to fold all of his air anyways. What did I have? What did I have? What did I have? That nuts. He's going to fold all of his air anyways when I bet so small, and he's going to raise all of his monsters because he probably doesn't want to slow play. So I can, when I bet that small, I keep so many weak hands in his range so that I can fire on the turn and the river. On that board, there's the possibility that I'm going to get slow played by flopped flush or something like that, but it's a small possibility given all the other holdings he could have. I'm gonna check. This is definitely a good board for me to delay a c-bet on. Very good example of a board on table 2 I'm talking about. Very good example of a board on which if you bet the flop, you're not really sure if you want to bet the turn plus the river, because you do want him to fold queen x, but then he's probably not folding ace x, but you do want him to fold. But he has more ace x in his range, but you do want him to fold his flush draws too, so you're not sure when you get called on the flop whether you should keep firing turn and or river. I should have checked what I had. Oh shit, I did have ace king. That's a weak fold. Should have checked before folding. But yeah, great board. Great board obviously to check. Yeah, this this just made me lose my train of thought. To check and delay c-bet basically, because like I said, like I stated in a previous board, a good example of a board on which you don't know if you have to fire 1, 2, or 3 barrels for your flop bluff to be optimal basically. And by checking the flop, you still have a lot of made hands in your range, but you keep things a lot more simple because you eliminate all of his monsters if he check calls you on the turn. This is definitely the kind of board where against most weaker opponents I will be barreling turn plus river most of the time. if the board comes brick, unless my opponent gives me some timing tells that he does have a pretty strong made hand that he's not gonna let away. But this is a situation where a lot of players will check back a6, and you do want to keep your balance to check back a6 low, as well as all your potential turn plus river bluffs, and then bet the turn plus river with your a6 and your bluffs. Because like I said, if you bet the flop, you basically don't gain any info on your opponent's range when he calls you, so you're kind of lost on the turn. And by checking the flop, I think you reduce the risk of your bluff a whole lot more by going for turn plus river instead of flop plus maybe turn plus I don't know river, basically. It doesn't mean I'm never going to bluff that flop. I'm going to adjust to some potential leaks my opponents will show me, obviously. But as a default, as a general rule of thumb, I will be looking at checking this flop more than betting it. Table 3, kind of the same example. I'm dealing a c-bet here in order to make him fold all of his... I'm always assuming that I have nothing at all in every hand that I play. I should have mentioned that in the very beginning, of course. But in order to make him fold all of his air anyways, I'm gonna look on table 2 because it would be dumb not to, and ace 4 is not enough to do anything on that situation, I think, given that I haven't built a historic yet against this player. So yeah, on that board, I think by checking back the turn, you do have a lot of made hands still in your range. You avoid the check raise, flop check raise bluff that some people will pull pretty often, I think, on that board, because most players tend to barrel the flop if they have absolute air. Here, table 1, this is a perfect board to dunk lead on after flatting from the big blind. A perfect example of a board where if your opponent doesn't have anything, he can't really raise you just for the fun of it, just because you could very well bet 3-bet a wide range of hands in his face. And here, this is a perfect board. Once again, I'm assuming that I have nothing at all, but I think this is a really good board for me to fire 3 times and hope that... I mean, there are so many one-pair type of hands that he's going to call the flop that will either fold the turn or the river, given how much of my flop dunking range got there on that turn, basically. So this is an obvious good spot to bluff. And yeah, the jack 4, dealing a c-bet is good for all the reasons that I've mentioned. I'm just repeating myself over and over on that again. So, yep. I think it's been around 45 minutes. I think this went pretty well. I did got a chance to analyze some board texture. I think this is a really good exercise for board texture analysis and which boards you want to barrel a lot, not barrel, shut down on, and all this stuff. And I think I could come back with that sort of video again in the future. Definitely, I hope it worked out well. I hope you enjoyed it. I probably will check it back again just for the entertainment value of me doing absolutely anything. I'm just gonna re-raise my last couple of hands. I'm re-raising quite a lot from the blinds, but it's a way of showing how weak people usually play in those situations at smaller stakes, and how exploitable they can be just by playing really aggressive. Because like I've mentioned in the beginning, I think most players' league in general is just not to be aggressive enough. So it's a good exercise to pump up your aggression volume, pump up the volume, and board texture and hand reading and range reading a lot too. So hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna play my last couple of hands. I'm gonna basically sit out on next big blind. And my bluffs are working. This is pretty cool. I'm gonna min re-raise here just because it's so short, and I think this is funny. Isn't it, guys? Look how funny I am. $2. Ah, I'm so funny. I win. So yeah, I think all in all, this is a pretty good demonstration of how pure aggression can win a lot of pots. I obviously made a lot of mistakes, but I think I got my point across. We all learned things about hand and board and range readings, and I hope you all got entertained for the past 48-ish minutes. So hope you enjoyed it. The doctor signing off and telling you to look at your cards when you play. Unless you want to practice. Drop down in stakes and don't look at your cards. This is fun too.